Welcome to Drum Addicts on Andertons TV, and today we've got from thousands and thousands of miles away, we've dragged him out of his office. This is Andy Zildjian, who's the CEO of Sabian, and we're going to chat about cymbals today.
And have a good time doing it.
Yes, once I've dragged you out of the pub as well, obviously.
That was hard. Well, when I started the job in 2006, at that point the Canadian dollar came up, and so we lost like about 20% of our income because of that. And then the copper prices came up, so we lost another 27% of our income. And then everything got great in 2008. Both of them started to come down, and then the whole world fell apart in 2008. So I've been working so hard in Canada, I have really not had much of a chance to get over here and see everything that's happening. But every time I get anywhere near this area, if I'm going to be in visiting Italy, Spain, Germany, Scandinavia, anywhere, I have to come back to London, to England, because it's so much fun, and people are great here, and the music scene is so happening. I got to be a part of it. So even just little tiny bits I was. But about 3 years ago, we decided that we needed to take a really good in-depth look at everything that's happening with us, with the industry, with music and everything that's happening over in Europe. And so I decided that starting in September of 2016, all the way through at least another year, maybe two, I was going to be coming over here probably about every month, every other month. But the best part was that a year after we had made that plan, my daughter told me that she wanted to go to London School of Economics. Good job, kid, you go, because Dad's going to be over every month from when you get started. So now I've been here every month. Christmas time I probably won't make it over, and probably not during January because of the NAMM show going on. But really, if not every month, every other month, I want to be here and in other parts of Europe to see what's happening and really get a good in-depth understanding so that we can better communicate, so that we can have better contact with everybody and everything that's happening over here. So yeah, I haven't been, but I plan on being.
But you
here.
will be, that's fine. Yeah. So you mentioned your daughter actually. Is she the correct daughter I'm thinking that actually works for Sabian?
Oh, no.
Different daughter?
No. Both of my daughters are in college.
Right.
And so no, they're not working for us. And actually
Yet.
You're right.
Send her to business school and then...
Well, that's it. I wanted to get her MBA.
Yeah, exactly.
But my sister has kids who work during the summertime. They work at the factory, and they live up really right near where the factory is. I don't live right where the factory is. I like being a little bit farther away because I can be at the factory, be involved in everything that's going on, and really get into the bubble of being inside the factory. But I can also get away from it and really see what's happening with the rest of the markets, the rest of the world, without having that deep influence of being right there and thinking specifically about different products, innovation, what people are doing, how to do things better. I can step outside and then come back in with a fresh view. And so my kids don't live up at the factory, but at the same time, there's business for us everywhere. There's things to do in our company all over the world. So eventually, yeah, they'll be in.
Yeah. Well, obviously, as the whole cymbal history has happened, it's a very family-orientated business, obviously, with the surname you have and the history from before. But you yourself, obviously, are Robert's son.
Yep.
So even in Sabian's history, you're second generation. So you're already building through them, aren't you? So you're already...
Well, second generations in family businesses, in third generations, I have always found had real difficulties in understanding the reasons why the first entrepreneur, the first person started the company, and understanding the passions, the desires, the sounds, everything that's involved with having started that company. And I'd watched, I don't want to name names, but there are three specific companies in the drum side that I watched people in second and third generations come in and say, do you know who I am? I'm a vice president. Step in and absolutely ruin the company. Or before it was completely ruined, they had to sell it off out of the family. And when I first started in this business, I didn't know if it's what I wanted to do. I worked at a store for a while. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time talking and working with consumers coming in, trying stuff out. And then I started working in the factory. And that's when I thought, this is actually really cool. What we're doing is very cool. And then I started, I was a road rep, traveled around Eastern United States, and then I picked up all of the United States for management, and then I did all of South America and Central America, and then eventually worked my way up to the point where I am now, because I never wanted to be that person, that family member that came in and had no clue what was going on, didn't care about what the product was, and blew it. So it's like, I'm kind of proud of that.
Well, as a company, we're third generation.
You are? Okay, good.
Lee, who runs the business now, dad and granddad. So I thought I'd bring that up just because there's so much history with the surname that you have such a passion for the product.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, when
you had, I knew you'd worked every step. I remember Jay had told me that you'd done everything from the factory right up. So I wanted to explain that was your avenue. You've purposely
I find it very important.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, I mean, if you're going to tell somebody, hey, go do this, and they look at you and you say, you can't do that. If you've done the job, you can look at them and say, yeah, you can.
So, Lee, you need to work in the warehouse. That's what you need to
do. Well, maybe not that far back.
So, with regards to the product, so you've got all your different lines from your cast and your sheet, but everyone sort of knows AA and HH as your two lines. So explain how AA was named and why that's come about.
Well, when we actually first started the factory, not the company, but the factory, it's back in 1968, we were making cymbals for Zildjian Company at that point, things that they just didn't have time to make. The extra thin cymbals, the swish pang knockers, that kind of thing, the Chinese cymbals. Anything that was not something that was run-of-the-mill and fast, that you couldn't just whip off 400 of them in a day. That's the kind of thing that we were making. And so when we left that company, we had guys who could make really hard-to-make cymbals, and we had the folks who knew how to do hand hammering. Because in '76 we bought the old K. Zildjian factory. Brought some of the guys, or my cousin Mike came over to the United States. He was working there for about a month until immigration found out that not only was he working there, he had no green card. He wasn't paying taxes. They came in and said, "You got 24 hours." So we got him all set up and brought him up to Canada. And he'd been working up there ever since around '77. Teaching the folks up in Canada how to hand hammer. And so there's a lot of people who remember and really revere the Canadian K. And those are guys who are players who are still part of the old family camp. But the folks who decided to listen to the product as compared to the name knew exactly what we were talking about when we started Sabian and came out with HH, being hand hammered. It's the same thing, just a different name. And AA is the old A Zildjians were pinched as compared to hammered, so that the shape was formed by pinching them around the edge as they rotated, pinch. And we knew how to do that. We were doing that for years with thin cymbals and a lot of the ones that we were making for Z Company. So when we started our own company, what do we call it? Well, we can't call it A because that's their name, and that's not an agreeable thing to do. But AA, so it was like automatic is what we decided to just go with that, because that one came into being because HH was such a given name. HH being hand hammered. So that's the simple explanation as to why we called it AA and HH. And yeah, those are the two beginning lines. And then along the lines, B8 came out, B8 Pro, which are our they're called European style cymbals because that's the kind of thing that Peisty was making all the time. And so we came out with those as our student line, and then we came out with those as our next step up line, which is the B8 Pro. But then we started innovating farther and decided there was a new way to hammer. Here, can I see that cymbal for a sec?
Yeah, the HH or?
Yep, just that one's great. When you hit a cymbal, the sound travels around this way and it goes in and out. What makes the character of the cymbal is the hammering that's in it, because every place where the cymbal is compressed, it's as if the sound is... you ever been running on a beach? You run on the beach, you're kind of slogging along, then you hit some tar and you go faster, and then you hit the sand again and you're slow. It's the same type of thing. The sound travels faster through the compressed parts. If you change the size and shape and where you have those compressed parts, you can change the way the cymbal reacts. And when we came out with the X hammering, that's where that came from. We had Nord Hargrove, who's just a genius with the metal, and Mark Love, who, if there's a shape and if there's a way of making sound travel through something, he knows what it is. He can figure it out. They're both of these guys amazing at being able to figure out how this breathes, its personality, how to make it do what it does. And he came out with the Mark at that point came out with AAX. And what that did was it gave an AA cymbal a little lower pitch because it could be flatter, but it also made it so it reacted faster and died out faster. We thought, that's so good. Let's try that with HH. And we came out with HHX, I think it was 2 years later. And maybe a little bit brighter tone than an HH, but real fast reaction and real fast die out. And those really, in essence, those are the four major cast lines. Except now we did one XS20. You remember that?
Yeah.
XS20. It's a great cymbal, but what it is we don't actually hammer it anyway like we do a regular AA or an HH or any of the X series. But we do make it in a fashion where it is less expensive to make because there's less hard work that goes into it, cold work. And so it fits the niche of being a good sounding cymbal, but not up to the level of the real professional sounding cymbals. But it's not nearly as expensive either, the XSRs.
So we've grabbed this one actually off the wall of the showroom. This is HH Vanguard, obviously, which is new.
Right.
Like very new, because it's been, last couple of months?
Mm-hmm. Well,
so some people were lucky enough to play these before, because I played these once. There's a ride that's, you know which one I'm talking about, don't you? That's lovely. Mm-hmm. But basically the Vanguards were... There's only a few cymbals in the line, isn't there?
There are. We wanted to keep it limited.
Cymbals?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think it's 8. So, explain why they've come from. Basically, you've got different HH, HHX. Mm-hmm. Obviously, done ones with Weckl, HHX Evolution. Mm-hmm. How did the Vanguards come about? They're very new. They sound great. How did they come about? What's their story?
Well, there's actually a couple stories involved in this, but we'll go right for the direct relationship, which was Crescent cymbals. They were made by, they were being made over in Turkey, and the fellow who was buying them in the United States had Jeff Hamilton, who's brilliant with cymbals. Just knows exactly what he's looking for, and really been very helpful in helping us to design what he was looking for. Stanton Moore and a few other things like this, the Vanguard, that we had just fixed our hand hammering. There was an issue that I had with hand hammering, that it just wasn't right. It wasn't speaking to me the same way it had been before. I found out what the issue was. We scrapped $250,000 worth of inventory, got rid of it, and started all over again with HH. And with that, I was in touch with the fellow who was running Crescent, and I said, "Look, Michael, you know that it doesn't matter where you buy the product. It doesn't matter where it's made. It's how it's made. You know that." And he said, I know, but I've got this thing. It's a mystique. It's got to come from Turkey. I said, why? Why does it have to come from Turkey when you know that you can get a better product from us? It's going to be more reliable. It's going to last longer. We're going to treat you like a human being, as compared to what he had some issues, very big issues. But eventually what happened was he said, all right, good. I'm done with buying things from Turkey. And he came over and was working with us. And that's where we started with the Vanguard line. And then the hammer tones with Jeff Hamilton and Stanton Moore's whole line that's just the weirdest. He's got some cool sounds. But at that point, Michael had been in such, he had been pushed so far financially because of dealing with the Turkish people that he had to just relinquish the company. He owed us so much money, we just sort of took it in. And in doing so, we found these sounds. The Vanguard, the element that we came up with specifically for them, Jeff's again and Stanton's, and thought, some of these are so good that we have to set these aside specifically for dealers and retailers who understand the cymbal. They know why it does what it does. They're interested in why it is. So the people who are players and are saying, I want to have a cymbal that does this, these folks can talk about it. They have the same kind of passion about it as we do. They can really dive deep into why a cymbal does what it does. The Vanguard, because it was a little more mainstream, actually. It can be used for country, it can be used for jazz, it can be used for big band, it can be used for rock and roll. It's much more mainstream. We decided just to take this one and put it into our regular line. So the HH Vanguard is just a regular part of our HH line. The other ones aren't going to be available yet. We're starting a new program. When that program starts, there will be specific stores that are allowed to have these.
Oh, okay. What? Let's touch. You know the ride I'm talking about. Explain. So there's a couple of sets of hi-hats, and there's a few crashes.
The 21?
Yeah, the 21.
Okay, yeah.
The 21 is so nice.
Yeah. Now, what do you want to know about the 21? What can I tell you about it?
So, go on. Where did that one? Why is that one special? Why do people play it and go, oh, listen to the bell and just? It's 21, so it's not everyone's particular size. I love a 21-inch ride. Just the first time I played that, I just went, wow, that's a special ride.
Actually, one of the reasons why that ride is so different is because of the things that we were learning from Jeff. We applied to some of the Vanguard, and without making it so that it was too similar to Jeff's, we took some of those techniques and just turned it a little bit. And HH and the Vanguard, that 21-inch sound, it's flat enough, right? Yeah. So you get that nice shimmer. It's got that good depth to it, but it's also got just enough curve so that it holds itself in. It's
just got a gorgeous bell on it as well, so you can the shimmer with the bell, you can just get some fantastic grooves with it.
That all happens from the point of as the bell comes down, you have to start your curve or not start your curve, depending on what you want from that one. And actually, I have to say, I'm trying to remember exactly where that starts, and I can't picture it at the moment, so I apologize for that. But it's where that bow starts to happen that changes the tension that's on the bell. And that's where you get that sound. So that you love where that tension starts.
Yeah, yeah, it's a special ride. We'll have to check it out. Yeah. So let's talk. So we grab another cymbal. This happens to be a ride. Let's explain. It's another HH. It's actually a very nice garage ride. We picked this one off the shop floor because obviously it's a very dull, natural-looking cymbal, but it's also because you can see the hammer marks really well. So let's explain how these are made, how cymbals in general are made, but how this one's made, the different hammers we use. Let's go into a bit more detail of why this cymbal has turned out as it is.
Well, we really have to start all the way back at the beginning because there's the family process. Family process is how we combine copper and tin, 80% copper, 20% tin, and make it so that it's not only malleable and flexible, but it's also more tonally, what's the right word? It has more tone, it has more character. Folks who have copied the family process are doing probably about 60 to 70% of it, which is good. It means that when they put it through the roller, it's not going to kill them, which actually could happen. It's not going to kill them, but they're missing out on the musicality that comes from the end part of the process that really makes the cymbal have a much more vibrant character. So anyway, we go through that process, and then what we do is we take a casting, which is typically, let's just say a 6-pound casting. They can be anywhere from 2.5 up to 13 pounds, 14 in some cases, and they can be 6-inch or 8-inch. And you take those and you put them in an oven, and you heat the oven up 1,600 degrees. And when they are to the point of being orange like the lights, take them out and put them through a roller. Now, here's the key. When you're putting them through the rollers heat up, so you have to put water on them to cool them down so they don't expand. So you get every cymbal that goes through to be at the same size. If you take a 1,600 degree piece of metal, put it in a very harshly compressed environment, and throw water in it, without having done the process correctly, it will explode. And there's the story of a fellow who came from the Istanbul factory, not Istanbul, but the factory in Istanbul, and went to Mexico. And I know it's a little bit embellished, but we say to cut his head right off when it exploded. So probably just cut him a little bit, but still, cut his head right off and he died. So that does limit the competition. Right? And anyway, from there, we'll put it through anywhere from 8 to 12 times. So it goes through at different compression rates so that it ends up being a very thin piece of metal. It also, by putting it through in different directions, you take the grain, and instead of having a grain in your metal, you've now really intertwined it. So it's a much stronger piece of metal. And every time it cools, it starts to come back closer to being crystalline. It will come back. So what you do is you keep running it through, and then on the last time you run it through, you've already got the cup in it. You put the cup in, you heat it up to only about 800 degrees, really, not very high, and throw it right into a cold water bath. And what happens then is now you have almost a homogeneous piece of metal. This is where everything separates, because now the AAs, AAXs will go off and they'll get pressed into general form that's the shape kind of what they're going to end up being. And then they go off to their hammers to be pinched into shape. HHs don't do that. You do keep them moving because you want to have the metal a little flexible. It's still got to be lively. But you take a cymbal that has a cup and is flat. And from that point, these guys, they have it on the anvil, and they actually hammer it out straight on into the shape that they want it to be. And as you can see, there are some spots where there's more hammering and some spots where there's a little less. Because if they hit it strongly, like this was a pretty heavy hit, it started to make that curve a little bit more than over here where there were a couple lighter hits. So lighter hit isn't going to turn it as much. And not only does it matter how hard you hit it, how often you hit it, but also with what you hit it. And we've experimented with different metals, different peens, and different shapes for the hammering, and found that, yeah, it does. It makes a difference. So when you're using the ancient style, you really get a nice, deep, dark, ancient type sound. When you're using something a little more modern, you end up more with, like an artisan sound would be a little more vibrant. So these things are actually hammered into shape. And we've got some folks, I mean, like a guy like Edgar, and another guy, Blair, and Dwight, and Charlie Brown, and Roy. These guys, they're all been hand hammering for actually, these two, Blair and Edgar, haven't been hammering for a long time. The other guy's been doing it for about 30 years.
I was going to say, there's a bad picture of him, but Charlie's in here somewhere. Charlie's
the master.
He's your go-to, isn't he?
He is, and actually Dwight, no, that's not hand hammering. He and Dwight are there. That's Roy. Roy's our utility player. He does well, but he doesn't have quite the same touch as the other fellas have. And there you go. There's Edgar. Oh no, that was Blair.
I was trying to find Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie's our famous hand hammer.
Well, it's funny. I met Charlie a couple of times at the NAMM show a few years ago, but I spent some time talking with him this year. I swear you had a picture of him. And my actual artisans he hammered. So Jay helped me figure it out, and he's actually one of my crashes was him. So.
Oh, really? Excellent. So he did that at the show for you?
Yeah.
All right.
We were trying to figure it out. So, we'll put a picture in.
Oh, there's definitely better pictures.
He literally spends his day putting these little divots in, and you sort of think, oh, a little tap with the hammer would do this. It's so much effort to actually, and to see how consistent these are, the same depth, same size. You're hitting it with another piece of metal to get it, and you can tell whether someone's left-handed or right-handed.
Yeah.
So
you can tell?
Yeah.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
You can really. A lot of people hit their cymbals, and the sort of fashion to have big cymbals and play quite heavily. You don't realise how much effort goes into every single one. I mean,
well, it's not as much effort as it is skill, because really when they're hand hammering, they're not coming down and smacking it. It's you play drums, you know the Moeller method, where really this is the only action that you're doing. The rest of it is that it's falling and it's bouncing back up. It's exactly the same thing with when they're hand hammering. This is the motion, and it comes down, and you can see their hands just barely open, boink, and it bounces right back up.
But to get it this even, because you're spinning the cymbal as you do it, it's a lot of coordination.
Oh yeah, that's the skill and craftsmanship.
They make it look a lot easier than it is.
Did you sit down and try it?
Yeah, I've tried it. I was terrible at it.
Most people are.
I made a 12-inch splash that sounded horrible.
You got a lot of boinks out of it, didn't you? Boink, bink, boink, bink.
I'd got the turning, but just the velocity. Some of mine were very deep, some of mine were very shallow.
Okay.
I'd got the coordination, but didn't. Anyway.
Well, think about it. You're used to hitting a snare drum, right? And you know you're going to be hitting the snare drum pretty much the same way until you need to put in an accent. It's the same thing. They've been practicing.
Yeah. But so each one of these little divots is a human hand hitting it.
Yep.
How many times does the average cymbal get hit? I know you know, so.
No, actually, there is no actual number that it has to be hit. I mean, the average is somewhere around the 3,000, which is why we advertise that, right?
Yeah, it's fine.
But in reality, it all depends on how they're hitting it, the shape we're trying to get, with what they're hitting it, and really what the end result is, what the desired end result is, and how the cymbal is coming along. So I mean, it could be anywhere from really, if you're doing it under 2,000 times, you're not hitting enough. Let's put a little more effort into it, guys. If you're up to 5, what are you doing? You're trying to kill it.
He's making his own cymbal. That's one to keep. The other thing that you don't realise when you're hitting it with the hammer is to get it even at the bell.
Oh, that's a
change the angle, and
that's a nasty one.
That's the key bit that I totally got wrong when I did it.
Yep.
But it's to see each one of these divots so well done, and this is why we picked this ride. It is an art form, isn't it? These are
absolutely
true craftsmen that makes each one of these cymbals. So,
and as you saw, like they were hammering along, and then they just sort of did this and started doing it, and you're watching them hammer the bell and thinking that looks easy.
Yeah, it's not at all. But the other thing is sometimes, obviously, it's poured into a cast form and then rolled, and you might have a particular piece of metal that's thicker here, or they hammer little areas to get the tone. And
well, that's one of the cool things. Not only the hammering has to know that, right? So they can feel that as they're doing it. The lathe guys know that too. Because one of the reasons why we do so many things by hand is because what we're doing is we're dealing with an imperfect piece of metal, right? As you said, some parts are more dense than others, and some it's not the same. So as you're going through and you're lathing, you can feel where it's getting soft, you can lean off a little bit, or where it gets a little hard, you can lean in a little bit. So you end up with a much more consistent sound by having the inconsistencies of doing it by hand.
But that's it. These aren't robots that make these, so it is an art form. And the little dense pockets, or more tin, more copper, it is clever how you can hammer those imperfections out to make it more consistent. So I'm just trying to see, there was a little area of more hammering, like a little cluster there.
Yeah, and there.
Yeah, there. But right, let's pick a different cymbal. So these are, we've picked all top end expensive ones, as you do. So this one, so we've got various different hammers on here. So actually it's quite clear to see it on there. So you've got the bigger ones. So explain what order they do it in. Why is some have got different sizes? Obviously, in your different series, you've got multiple hammers used. Let's explain this one. Why the big ones?
The reason why this is called artisan and not HH is because it's not fully hand hammered. So we can't call it HH. It's not. Well, these are using the same type of hammer as we would use for same type, but not exactly the same peen as for the X series, AAX, HHX. And what that does is it gives a different energy flow through the cymbal. So we do hand hammer it, and that does give you that flatter shape, but by putting these into it, you have a different frequency of sound coming through. So you can have almost, well, what would you end up with? I can't say it's an HHX type sound because it's really not. There's a lot more handwork goes into this than goes into an HHX, because this is hammered first, lathed, hammered again, and then finished. And that whole thing, it changes the inside structure of the cymbal. And if I told you too much, I'd have to kill you. But really it does. It changes the character of the cymbal because of the speed and the frequency, the way it travels through. And look, Mark is the one who's looking at it and saying, well, if we did this would change it that way and it changed it this way. And you notice how the bell is not. That's another thing that he was looking and saying, nah, if we don't do that, then we're going to get this sound and it's going to work better. Absolutely in his mind, he was putting together what we needed to do. And the fellas up there who are just the craftsmen put it all together. And we were really psyched with the sound that we got out of it, because it's not quite an ancient sound and it's not quite a modern sound. It is sort of a deeper kind of like that.
These are full body. That's how I always describe it. They are
excellent. Thank you.
There are a certain sound. I mean, when I've actually, this very cymbal is one that I own, an 18-inch artisan. Not this one. I stole this one off the shop floor.
Hey.
There's something about it. You can do cymbal swells on it, or you can just do very quick, sharp accents on it. It's very complex. It has a lot of hats that it can wear and go. Today I'm a crash, and today I'm going to be a swell. But
right.
You should
hear this as a suspended cymbal too.
I was just about to say,
man.
the person that got me into these, who actually doesn't work for you anymore, he had a load of prototypes. He was doing the Jojo Mayer Omni.
Sure. Yep.
And he had some, and I was like, I played his, and we talked about cymbals for ages, and I ended up buying one of these, but it is one of the orchestral ones.
Oh, there you go.
So I actually have a slightly different one. But we talk about cymbals quite a lot, and I've got a set of click hats.
Right, okay.
But brilliant on the bottom and natural on the top, and ordered.
So why did you pick that?
Well, you did the cymbal vote, and before they went live, they were at a dealer day, and you had both of them set up next to each other, and I was like, I really like that, but don't like that. And while no one was looking, I just went like that, and I put the top of one on the bottom of the other, and that's what I played, and I fell in love with it. So annoyingly, Jay had to order me the bottom of one and the top of the other.
Way to go, Jay.
And that's what I played. So that, because it was slightly different, I wanted the natural top, but I liked the brightness of the bottom, and that was how I picked it. But it was him that sort of said, right, don't just pick a cymbal because it says artisan on it. Don't just
man, definitely.
pick it. No, but it was him that
pick it because of the sound. You love the sound,
So it's something special, but yes, artisans, very complex, full-bodied sound. We'd go full circle. Great cymbal, and I own a couple now. I've got a set of hats as well, and they're awesome, and that's Carl Brazil's fault. But explain this. For many years, even when I owned it, I thought that was the person that made it.
No, actually,
it's not, is it?
No, that is. That's the person who picked it and said it was good.
Right.
In the artisans, that's what happens. They get picked. The person who picks them signs them and dates them.
Because that's when you get the certificate and your lovely red and black bag, and you feel posh because you bought a cymbal that's really, really expensive and sounds lovely.
And very cool.
Yes.
But if you grab like one of the HH, what's on the bottom of the HH, that's not. That's your name.
That's a different one. This one.
Right, there we go.
go.
This is what we used to call, we called it a mooey puck, because it looked like somebody was writing UMMYPUCK, but what that really is Carapace. Mike, who came over, the fellow who came to the States and then he got kicked out and had to come to Canada, his older brother and his mom and dad came over to the factory, and they were all teaching us hand hammering back in the 70s. Carapace is the K. And he came over to the factory, was teaching us how to make them. And what he would do is he would say, okay, that one's good enough, and he would sign it. And we were wondering, what are you signing? And he wouldn't tell us. He would just sign it. He would sign it. And somebody said, you're just signing your name, aren't you? And he said, no, I'm signing Sabian in Armenian and Turkish script. So
there we go.
So anyway, every one of them that he accepted was signed. And because the people who are trained in picking these things learned specifically from him, we decided that that's fair. That's fair. They can do the same because it's not Carapace's name, it's the name of the company. And they learned from him. They're carrying on that legacy. Fine with that. Yeah.
So even to the point where the cymbals are checked off, they say they're good enough to leave the factory. All that's done by hand. And
absolutely.
Each little station, be it taking the ingot to casting it to, it's all done by hand, isn't it? People think, if you buy a cheaper cymbal, it's robotic. It's not.
If you buy a cheaper cymbal, it probably is. Yeah, but as I like to say, we could test each cymbal once. We could use a machine to make them happen. They'd still sound good. We could do a lot of things that are mechanical and leave it at that, but we don't, because good isn't good. They have to sound great. And every cymbal, if you put it through a machine and it comes out, you have a product. And a product is not what we're making. We're making instruments. An instrument has a soul. A Stradivarius is not just a violin. It's an instrument that has a soul. Every cymbal that we make, every cast cymbal for absolutely sure that we make, is an instrument that has a soul. Every one of them has their own personality. Every one of them has a piece of the people who made it. If you don't have that kind of touch, if you don't have that type of ability to express that into the instrument, you might as well be making widgets. Who cares? I mean, that, like I said, the European style. Right?
So how many different stages of the factory, and then how many, because as we said with this booklet earlier, you're trying to show the people that actually make them. These are And this is one of your sort of newbies, isn't it?
That's, Edgar.
I love how you class newbie. He's still been there a few years.
He's only been there for 3 years, right?
Yeah, only.
Yeah, well, he and Blair came in and they said, there were 5 guys who showed up, wanted to be hand hammers. That's what they wanted to do. 2 of them made it. The other 3, whatever they're doing now, it's not hand hammering, right?
Do they still work in the company?
No, 2 of them decided that if they couldn't hand hammer, they weren't going to do it. And one of them said, well, yeah, I still like working here. Everybody's great. I'm going to stay. So, yeah, he's still there.
So how many people have you got working in the factory and in your sort of main office? Obviously, you've got marketing and all sorts of other...
In the main office and then the shop floor. But basically what you're talking about is in New Brunswick at the factory and the headquarters. Just over 100.
Wow, so there's quite a few. And how many of them are on the shop floor actually making?
Almost 90.
Wow.
Yeah, about 86, right in there. Yeah, 86. Yeah.
Yeah, so
depends on who's sick and if it's deer season. These Canadians kill me.
What would you pick out? Because obviously, like we bring up Charlie again. Charlie's he's the person you put on your booth at the NAMM show.
Sure.
He's the one that you always sort of say he's our master. Is he someone? Is it like when you're training a guide dog? You have one follow the other. So is he forever training a newbie, or do you leave him to just make great cymbals? How does it? How did he learn how to do it? Was it Charlie taught him?
Yes, actually, he learned from both Charlie and Dwight, and so did Blair. They both learned from Charlie and Dwight. So each one of them has their own technique. And so as you're teaching somebody, there's this theory in teaching, and one of the things I wanted to start with we have this thing called the Sabian Educator Network, and the idea is to try to help teachers, educators, understand how to teach not just what they're doing, but to the specific students, because everybody learns differently. And so these fellas, they each has their own idiosyncrasies, the way that they learn. And so both Dwight and Charlie would teach differently, but in the end, they would have enough information and there would be enough cross-teaching in a way that both of these fellas would be able to pick up what it is they're supposed to be doing well enough so that they've turned out to be excellent craftsmen.
And do you let them loose now? Do they make their own cymbals?
Oh, knock yourselves out, boys. Go for it, absolutely. Yeah.
So, because at one point they would do the start of the hammering and then someone would finish, wouldn't they? So,
as you start learning it, what you do is we figure out if you have the capacity to be able to hit correctly. And then from there, you start learning the techniques to actually make the cymbals be the personalities that you want them to be. And so, they do only start off with just shaping them, and then they used to just pass them off to Dwight and Charlie to finish. That's what we used to call them, finishers. Now, these guys are so good at doing a complete cymbal, we don't really have finishers anymore. Everybody's just good enough that they are hand hammerers, so that we don't have to define between someone who's a starter and someone who's a finisher. Just wide open. They're great.
So let's take a cymbal, and I'll grab this lovely one. Let's talk about every process. So we talked about hammering to start off with, and we have sort of talked about casting. We haven't really talked about lathing, but what else you have to? You obviously lacquer the cymbal and you stamp it. What else goes into making one of these? You put the lovely Sabian logo on the bottom of it. So what steps have we missed?
Well, we went through the casting and we were talking about the rolling. We didn't really talk much about cupping. What that is once you've made the cymbal, it's the thickness that you're looking for. You let it cool, and then you heat it up again just a little bit, and you push in the cup, which is just pressing in the shape there. Let that cool again, and then it goes into the tempering. The tempering is what we were talking about, where it gets back into that form and you dump it in the bath very quickly. And that's how you end up with that homogeneous piece of metal. From there, it will go to the hammers. Hand hammering, automatic hammering, depending on what you're looking for. Once you've finished with that, it goes on to, if it's going to be an X, it goes on to the X hammer, because that's a different process again. So you finish with that, that hammering is completed, which would be artisan, AAX, HHX, and then from there it goes back to lathing. The lathing is one of those jobs, it's one of the few jobs I never did in the factory, because if you're good at lathing, you're never leaving lathing.
And that's why you've got all your fingers still. So,
yeah, although I did lose the hair off the front of my face from the oven. But yeah, that's one of that's a technique. We have 2 guys who've done over 1 million cymbals, and those 2 fellas are absolutely, they're the only ones, you know, the duo, not the duo, come on, JoJo's cymbal.
The Omni.
Thank you very much. They're the only ones. It happens. They're the only ones who can actually finish the Omnis, because we make them so thin on the edge that you have to have that kind of delicate touch to make it thin enough without going too thin. And they're the only two who really have that. We have 7 others who do lathing, and they're all very good, but they're not that good. These guys, they're top fellas.
So if you own an Omni, you're guaranteed it's 50-50. 2 people lathed it.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's quite cool.
Yeah. You'd either have Ali Kugel or you have Richie, and either one of them, you know.
They're your elite lathers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, both of them.
So moving on, so we've lathed the cymbal. How does someone get it nicely in the bag in our shop? What happens after that?
Okay, well after that, then we just take the edge off, because at that point it's still quite sharp on the sides. Not that it's pointy sharp, but there's knurls and stuff that we cut off the shape, and as you're going through and doing things, it's still rough on the edge. So anyway, that gets taken off. Then from there it goes into either be buffed or tested. And when it goes into testing, we test it. Listen to it and decide yes or no or maybe. And the maybe piles, these are great. These go back to get cut up and start over again. These things are either going to end up in that pile or they're going to be really, really good. It's this strange, like I said, everyone has its own personality. They're either going to grow up to be awesome cymbals or not so much. They get sent away. So they start off into those 2 piles, and then the good stuff gets put up in inventory. The maybe stuff gets its own little separate area. Those things go back and get cut up, and then usually about 3 days later, try those maybes again. And at that point, everything's cooled enough. The cymbal is still actually quite warm at this point. Everything's cooled enough so that you're starting to really get the flavor of that personality. And we can test that again and decide yeah or no. Put it up in inventory, and then from there, we will dip them, because what happens is it keeps the oxidation from happening. Tin, this gray area right here is tin oxide. So the tin rusts, basically, is what it is. And so that's part of what gets lathed off. That opens up the cymbal. It allows it to vibrate freely. If we don't coat this, it'll start getting grayish and it'll start getting finger marks on it. You know what? If you've ever had, say, chicken, which is just the worst thing to do, have chicken on your fingers and grab your cymbal, you're going to have a thumbprint there for 30 years. It'll just stay on there. But from that point, they get dipped so that they're preserved. And we've been working for years and years and years refining that so that it's thinner and thinner and thinner, but still has the ability to preserve the cymbal, because we want it to have the least amount of effect on the sound as possible. And from there, it goes and it has the Sabian trademark put in, which you have to do on everything you make, which is fine. Get that put in. And then we get the logo and the series put on there, and bag it, off it goes. So, but it's tested. Actually, I was wrong. Once it has the logos on, it comes back again. We test it one more time, and then we bag it and put it away.
So there's like a final test before it goes. And
right.
This particular one goes in, like I said before, a very posh bag, has a certificate.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
How, if you're allowed to say, how long does this cymbal take on average to make, all the way through the line? Obviously, you leave it to rest and things, but how many actual minutes or hours? I know it's hours.
So not including resting time?
Yeah, excluding that.
It would take probably 2 days total to if you're not talking about resting time, all you're doing is pouring, heating, cupping. That's all right. 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah, 2.5 to 3 days. Really, that much time that's really put into it, because the processes are running and rolling, and everyone's got to wait in line, and then it goes through. But if you do include things like the resting times, you add another 2 days right onto it. So 5 days, pretty easily.
So Colin, you broke it in the same amount of time it took to make. Colin, I know who he is. So you mentioned cupping. You glazed over that very quickly. That is actually a little science in itself. So even just in the couple we've got, hopefully we'll get this on camera.
Yep.
Is how many different press have you got for cupping? Because even just even if you take out sizes, 22, 24, a ride cymbal, for instance, the angle of the cup, you must have so many different presses. So how you glazed over that saying that was one easy process. It's not. Explain about that. So that's a natural bell. So a raw bell, sorry, that's a natural bell. Even that process, which obviously puts a lot of stress under the cymbal and forms it very early on in its manufacturing process, is an art form. So not an art form, but
art form, but it definitely dictates the sound of the cymbal. No question. The higher the bell, the tighter. If you don't lay it, the more tension it's going to have, and the more it's going to affect. Actually, the more isolated it will be, because it will take the sound that comes here and be a better reflector for the sound coming out. If you have, for example, that one, it's not quite as strong, so the sound will actually travel up farther into that cup and come back out. So now the cup is affecting the sound with its own shape, as compared to this one, which is affecting the sound by not allowing the sound to come into it. It reflects the energy back out. So that the size of the cup, the tension of the cup, the height, whether you finish it or don't finish it, all of it has an effect on the cymbal. I mean, a lot of the HH, you'll notice, have, not only do they have a little bit smaller cups, but they're not quite as high. You know, you get an AA cymbal will have a higher pitch because you want to have that height in tone. You want to have that projection coming out that's screaming at you. Whereas if you lower it down a little bit, it gets a little more cool, man. It's a little more cool.
The profile of the cup, but also the profile of the bend, so it's quite a shallow cymbal, and then also the thickness from here to here. Each individual element just completely changes and dictates every single cymbal and every single series to make it be the instrument it is. So when you're doing R&D, and I know lots of people that have done their different roles for you always say, oh yeah, we take that one and then we come back 5 years later and we change that idea. And how do you, what to you dictates a good cymbal? Why do you say, right, this is the one we're going to sell and this is the one we're going to make it? What do you,
there's a few different ways.
Do you get a customer and go, oh, that's very much in fashion? Or
yes.
Do you then get a product and go, this is just so good the market will like it?
Yes.
Explain how we do that. Go
all
on.
Of it.
I know that, but explain it.
But yeah, we try to be in contact with consumers, with players, with professionals, everybody we can, to try to ask them, what is the sound you're looking for? What are we missing? And that's why when we first started the company way back in 1981, there were only about 300 different types of cymbal sounds that you could get, and now there's somewhere like around 5,000 different sounds that you can find out there. Because if you have that inquisitive mind, you keep asking what's going on. You want to know, because you want to not just produce a product, but make an instrument for the people who want that. That's their voice. You really have to ask, is this the sound you're looking for? And so we do, like we did with that cymbal vote. We did with Cymbal and asked people, here's the sound. Yeah. What do you think? Is this what you're looking for? I love that. I thought it was so cool.
It's funny because you obviously put a series of products, or a line, a dozen products, and you go, oh, that's probably the one that's going to win, and that one's quite cool. And even you guys were surprised.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Everyone loves the sick hats and they're really weird. So Sabian have always done some stranger sort of cymbals. I'm thinking the hexagon splash.
The Roctagon.
Yeah. Yep. I can't remember the name, but the ones that sort of bent up.
Oh, the V-Wave.
They look like the front of the sleigh.
Yeah, the V-Wave, yeah.
So you've always made sort of out there percussive instruments and sort of gone, this is us moving forward. It's not, we don't just make circular pieces of metal. We can create a different sound, a different texture with a product. So I actually really liked the ISO crashes that had the holes here. And they were great.
They were. Yeah.
So for you to bring out the cymbal vote, it sort of gets the consumer involved. But for you, you're also going, oh, we're testing something that some people might not like, and a lot of the time people just love it because it's so different.
Well, I'm hoping, and the hope was that people would look at it and say, dang, man, that's an interesting idea. These guys come up with some pretty cool stuff. Now, and then we can learn from that what everybody's looking for. Yeah, I love, like the V-Wave and things like the Roctagon, and we came out with the Ozone, first to come out with the Ozone and that kind of stuff, and just there's no fear in innovating. I mean, try anything. whether it will do well in the market, where people will like it, you got to ask that question a lot. So we'll take a lot of prototypes around, like we did with the cymbal vote. We'll do the same type of thing in a much smaller way. Bring it to stores, bring it to players who are pros and regular general business players. Ask them, what do you think? So we do a lot of asking questions to find out. Is this what you're looking for? Oh, absolutely. But no fear. And I got to tell you, man, if you ever come to the factory, we have this room called Area 51. You know what I'm referring to, right? Right. Okay, so Area 51, where we take all the things that didn't work, or all the things that did work, but it's not quite finished yet. This is where the cymbal ended up, but this is where we were when we decided, let's keep this one and put it away. And we have a room that's probably like 30 by 15. That's full of all thousands of these different cymbals. And people come up and they'll hit them and think, I never heard that before. Now stand back a little bit. Let's show you what we got. That's the experiment room. That's where everything comes out.
So for you, asking even your own roster, which is obviously a massive roster of lots of pro players, do you get lots of crazy answers? Because in store, people can't describe a sound. They just sort of go, oh, I want this, and they can't describe why they want it. So when you're designing a cymbal, even for an artist, even whatever big artist you want to pick, do they find it hard to describe what they want? Or do they go, oh, I really want that bell sound on this? Or how do you design, like the Evos, for instance? I'm thinking Dave Weffel probably knows what he wanted. So
he knew exactly what he wanted. Yeah. The thing was, but what you're really talking about is vocabulary, right? Being able to express yourself the way that you really want to be understood. Yeah. And what we do is with a lot of guys is we actually when any player comes up to Canada, we start off with, what's your vocabulary? And we'll go through and make sure that we're all on the same page. We know what we're talking about. When you say X, we understand it as Y. So go ahead and say X, but we know what you're talking about. So yeah.
So there's like a cymbal dictionary that you open up when you've got a player in.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, you do that a lot. But at the same time, because this is what we do, we have a really good ability to translate ideas into actual products.
It's interpreting crazy sounds. I really want this crash to be chocolatey. It's like
okay. I've heard chocolatey, woody. Yeah, a little more gas. Okay, the woody one is the one that kind of blew me away. I'm thinking, wait,
use bigger sticks.
Wait, woody. Yeah. Why don't you use a barrel tip non-nylon? That might do what you're looking for. A natural tip could help. Yeah.
Well, it's one, getting customers, sort of interpreting a customer's needs. Yeah. Sometimes the vocabulary is a strange approach. What cymbal's your favourite? I'm going to ask all these cliche questions, but go on.
No, that's okay. Well,
that's one of my favourites.
I don't blame you. That's a beautiful cymbal. To me, my favourite cymbals. They're deep.
Ones with the biggest profit?
No, actually, that's nice. There's nothing wrong with it. But at the same time, no, I really have an affection for certain sounds. Okay. I really like a nice, deep, rich tone. So when I can find a nice, thin, really flat 22 or 24 inch ride, HH, oh man, and a lot of times those will be brilliant cymbals. Which is, you wouldn't think so with an HH. You think natural would be what you'd want to have. But what the brilliant does is just sort of mellows the tone just a touch. And that sound difference when I'm playing it, to me, that's just, they're speaking. They're beautiful. I love that voice. And there's another one that we had that we're coming out with again soon, is the sound control. Like a 22-inch sound control ride. Oh my God. Because what we've done is we take the cymbal, just tip it a little bit at the edge, so you can have a much flatter cymbal. So you can hammer it as much as you need to, but at the end you can tip it just a little bit, and so you have a nice, deep, rich tone that doesn't over crescendo and will stay, just right in its spot. Yeah, for crashes, and completely the opposite for crashes. I like something when I hit it, it goes really just bang out there and nails. And hi-hats, I got 2 sets of hi-hats on, which is kind of silly, but because over here on my X hats that don't move, I have fast hats. kind of useless.
Yeah.
And then I've got a regular set of a stage over here, and the AAX stage. And I love the tone that comes out of them. They're nice and high pitched. They're crisp. They're right there. And these things they're actually a little bit flatter and a little bit deeper. They're a little experimental too, but they're a little bit deeper, so I can get a different tone out of them. So I mean, it's all. I like a deep, dark ride, but I like a high piercing crash. And hi-hats, both.
What's your wackiest cymbal combination? So I'm thinking of one time where we put two 24-inch bass rides as hi-hats.
Oh man!
And the hi-hat stand nearly broke.
Yeah, it would.
But
yes.
And there's a person that will be watching. He actually has two bass rides. Because one's in his A rig and one's in his B rig when he's on tour, and he actually did a whole song with these two rides as hi-hats. You'd be surprised how much
it'd be pretty
chick
cool.
there was. But
did he have to change the springs or anything?
It was a hi-hat stand that was struggling, yes.
Yeah, because actually we do have a few of our endorsers who have done that type of thing. They'll take 20s and 21s, and they have to get different springs on the hi-hat.
Right.
Really, because otherwise you're going... It's just not working, right? But if you put those heavier springs on there, which it's a modification, be careful what you're doing. You gotta let a pro do it. But some of these guys, they'll play some pretty wacky stuff.
For me, it was just how far away you've got to have your leg to be able to have rides that big. But
well, that and you're right. It has to be over here, otherwise you're never going to get to the snare drum. You're going to be hitting sideways to get in there. That's not good technique.
We won't break sticks because you're sort of glancing across it. But no, it's cool that we do sorts of things in the start. If it's a stack or something different. We did a video the other week and we had an alley bell with a 10 aero splash on top.
How'd that sound?
Really cool. Check out the video. It sounds really cool.
Okay.
Because he was sort of doing uppercuts, drum and bass, and getting the bell sound, but getting the chick with the splash as well.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it was quite a cool combo.
All right.
But what's the wackiest one? You must literally just go down
to
the factory.
Oh my God, the wacky, are you kidding? There's so many strange things that we put together at the factory. Look at Mark and I will look and go, yep, man, why not? I mean, it's too many to number. I mean, because we're standing there in the candy store. We have everything. So like things like, you know, we come in and we'll try out the chopper and you take like the ship's bell and put the chopper on top of it and see what happens when they match. And you get some weird stuff because not only you have creative people who are coming up with it and are not afraid to innovate, coming up with new ideas, but you have everything at your fingertips to try it, right? Things that experiment didn't work, but if we put this together with that would sound really gnarly. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, so no one's afraid of trying anything. You may never see it.
Well, we try it in the store, but we can't bash too much because we have to put it back in its lovely bag and put it back on the shelf. So at least when you break something, you put it into recycling or something.
Yeah, that's it. Like I said, we're in the candy store. If we break it, oops, get another one.
Yeah. Very quickly, let's touch on recycling. Basically, because you can smell any bad one back down. And you literally recycle pretty much everything.
The only thing that we don't recycle that we have to send off to be recycled is when we're making brass cymbals. There's really not a whole lot of scrap, just a little bit of lathing and some edging that gets done with those. It'll take a while for us to get a bale together, and we'll have somebody who does recycling come and take that away. But everything else, everything, B8, B20s, all of it, cut up and go into the melting pot. And the thing with those is because someone like Nort and a guy named Louis Faro, who is understanding the metal really, really well, they keep an eye on how it's coming out. Every day we want to see how the melt is, how the combinations are working. We know how much B8 and how much B20 we have to put in along with new product, a new copper and tin, so that we can keep recycling for every single piece of scrap goes in and gets recycled. It's fabulous because, not only is it good for the environment, but we get to take something and say, we made a mistake, let's start over again. So there's no fear that comes into it. You can take that, start it all over again.
No wastage, you just...
Right.
Thank you, Andy, for popping in and coming thousands of miles to come to our little shop and drag you out of your office. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you've learned lots and made it all the way to the end of the film. And we'll see you on Drum Addicts on Andertons TV next time.
Thanks, man.